Alright everyone, it's time for Occult Literature, video number 327, The Principles of Occult Healing. This is a theosophical work, 102 pages, so it's intermediate in size. Link in the description of my edition of this work on Amazon. Second and third links are to my books blogs. Haven't done the blog post for this or the last theosophical work from yesterday actually yet, so got to get on it today after I'm done with my editing round. Now this is a very good work, again by Annie Besant. I'm doing a bunch of works by her for a while now before I go back to some herbal folklore. And basically it lays out a plan, intermediate term, awaiting the coming New Age in which there would be basically miraculous and divine healing. And she points to the story of Jesus and certain stories involving Gautama Buddha and so forth. Because in Theosophy you have the idea that each age and each subsequent racial group that arises in that age has an avatar. So you have Zarathustra, you have Buddha, you have Jesus. Sometimes there are others that are mentioned throughout time, and that each one sort of advances the world, advances mankind. The idea was that because of the rise of modernity and steam engines and electricity and all this newfangled telegraph stuff, basically that we were moving towards the next age in which you'd see truly divine things happening, a much more occult, spiritual, enlightened world. This hasn't happened yet. I suppose in some ways we're moving in that direction, in some ways unfortunately well away from it. But the idea was that there was a new type of healing specifically in this era. We're talking the late 19th, early 20th centuries, and this is actually true, drugless healing. That is the idea that prior, mainly, if a person was sick, you gave him narcotics, and you gave him like calomel and stuff. You gave him potentially poisonous substances. You move on through the Thomsonian theorem, which clings to the Humeric theory in part, and you get rid of the leechcraft and taking physic and giving people arsenic and mercury, which would literally burn their bones right out of their jaw in some cases, and disfigure them and leave them all sick and pockmarked. Wonder why they're dying. I need another dose of mercury. And into the herbal simples. And in this era, people are experimenting with mesmerism, electricity, X-rays, things of that nature. You've got the more modern atomic theory by this time than you had certainly 100 years prior. And all of these things, electricity, the telegraph, you find them mentioned frequently in theosophical works as being indicative of different sort of spiritual symbolic things. It sort of follows the basic theorem, as above, so below. And by the way, as below, so above, therefore, in a juxtaposition. So if you have all of these things, you have the ability to transmit information rapid fire from one person to another through a copper wire. Well, why can't we do that with our brains? Our brains use electricity, ergo we can have a mind telegraph. These things are literally spoken of. It's interesting, of course, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have television, they didn't have modern radio systems, but they had the telegraph, they had electricity and all these things, and because they were novel, they constantly are used in a healing sense as well. Magnetism, electromagnets, steam baths, and all of these wonderful things. Everything that could be experimented with was. There was one surgeon that used to take very thin slices of ape testicles and graft them onto people's kidneys to try to cure various ailments. By the way, in retrospect, although he was considered a quack for 100 years, it has been found that it is capable, the material, if sliced thin enough, it actually can bind to the kidney. We're not exactly sure what it's useful for, but technically his theory was correct. The binding did occur. Some people died of sepsis on the slab, but most of them recovered, more or less. They claimed it gave them more pep in their step. Who knows? Maybe it was the opium that they gave them afterwards. Now, this is definitely a really good work. It's definitely a piece of medical history just as much as it is a piece of medical theory. But it talks basically about how the current period of medicine then, which is 100 years ago, was the stopgap immediately before the coming age, in which healing would be basically like Jesus did, like, oh, you know, have faith and be healed, and the person could suddenly walk. The leper suddenly was cleansed. That was seen as something that was going to become very real in the coming age, that the Theosophists, technically speaking, are still waiting for. So again, link in the description of my edition of this work on Amazon. I do highly recommend it, especially if you're into Theosophy or medical history. Both of those, you'd love this work. Now, second and third links to my books blog as well. That's about all. Peace out.